if you're ready and willing to change this one metric, you can then have a greater impact on all these other diagnoses. Does that interest you?
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians. To overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be, visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget, CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. My guest today turned to medicine as a second career after a decade working as a project manager in commercial and retail construction. Today, she's a highly visible advocate for wellness and healthy lifestyle. So let's hear Dr. Siatta Dunbar tell her story. And what a pleasure it is for me today to be speaking with Dr. Siatta Dunbar out in the western portion of the United States. And what part of Washington are you in, Dr. Dunbar?
I'm actually in Portland, Oregon. I work in Washington, but I physically reside in
You
Oregon.
might know the host would mess it up. Okay. Well, now that we have you geographically fixed, we can go on with our conversation. I've really been looking forward to speaking with you. You've got a great story and really unique compared to most of the physicians that I talk to. And I think we'll start, as we always do at the beginning, which is a little unusual for you. Medicine was not actually your first career choice, was it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so actually went to school for architecture at the University of Virginia. Did construction management for many, many years. So medicine is truly kind of my second pass at life, so to speak. But yeah, I started kind of in this, doing architecture and on the job site, building office buildings and retail parks. So quite a shift. And
can I just ask you, where did that interest come from? How did you get interested in that as a youngster?
It's interesting. When I was pretty young, once my family came to the States and I started going through kind of, my formative years of education, I was really drawn to building models and drafting and those sorts of technical things. So for whatever reason, I just kind of gravitated to that concept of building spaces that people could occupy, and really enjoyed getting into the details of designing and drafting, and then being able to have something materialize out of whatever was in my brain. So that's kind of what led me towards architecture.
And you mentioned your parents, and I gather they were not native to the U.S., and maybe you weren't either. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Monrovia, Liberia. My mom's family is from Jamaica, St. Mary's Parish. My father's is from Liberia. They met back there. So I was born in Liberia, and then we moved or immigrated to the United States in 1980, when the first of what ended up being many sort of military coups in Liberia. So we sort of fled the country in 1980. Yeah. And
were there any medical types in your family at all?
None at all. And I think that's part of the reason, medicine never even seemed like even an option, to be honest with you. Yeah, I had no one in our family that had done it. So I was the first.
Well, that's even more intriguing. So here you were a well-educated, very capable architect, making a pretty good living, I assume. And where did the notion come that it would be a great idea after 10 years of that to go to medical school?
when I think about my past, I think I've just been sort of nudged along the way. When we got to the States, I started to develop, an interest in, whether it was things on television or, wanting to get got a little intrigued about, okay, what is medicine about, but never even fathomed I could be a physician. Like that was just not even on the radar. So I actually started volunteering on like my local rescue squad. And that was kind of, for me, this was as good as I was ever going to get, or as close as I was going to get to anything medical. It totally infuriated my mother. But, but my mom went to finishing school in Switzerland. So she was very much kind of the very prim and proper. And I was a bit rough and tumble for her, I think. And, the fact that I was sleeping at the rescue squad on the weekends was just,
I see.
That was some challenging times, but that's kind of where I started, was just volunteering, and series of, things in my life, and some pretty significant losses just kept you just kind of get nudged. And I think being open to what if is kind of how I ended up, pursuing medicine.
So it sounds like you'd had the opportunity to at least to see the inside of a hospital from time to time, at least from the emergency department area, and that just piqued your curiosity and you decided to take a leap, right?
Yeah. I think I was pushed. Pushed emotionally.
Really?
Well, I think it was an emotional push, I mean, there was really no one that said, "Oh, Siatta, you should do this." It was really just my sister died of metastatic breast cancer, going through that process with her. And then 4 years later, my mother died of a heart attack. And it was just, it just became, I don't know if you can call it, I don't know if I want to say divine, but it was just sort of, things just started really stacking up to say, Siatta, are you really doing what you not called, but really tugs at your heart? And it was just that constant nudge, and just that sort of reevaluation of, what are my choices? Is this leading me in the way I want to go? And I think my mother died very suddenly. And one of the things that I carried around with me was, tomorrow is not promised. And although it took me many years to still go, to quit my job and go back to school, because I hadn't done any sciences, so I had to go back to post-bac. It was that thought, right? Am I truly living the life that I'm intended to live? Am I honoring their memory? Am I doing what, I'm really, really feel passionate about? And it took time, but then I got there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very powerful story. And you mentioned that your previous baccalaureate degree didn't really give you enough science to make you a viable candidate for medical school. And so you actually did another 2 years,
yeah,
right?
Indeed. Yep.
Of undergraduate work. What was that like for you? Did you find the science easy enough to handle, or was it overwhelming? What was the story at that point?
I was hanging on as tight as I could most times. What have I gotten myself into? It was tough, right? I mean, I was, I'd worked, and, I'm coming back to school a little later in my years, and doing sciences that, that I hadn't really had any exposure to. So it was challenging. I feel.
Did you ever doubt your decision during those couple of years?
Not to the point that I would stop. I certainly, had moments where I was like, man, really? Is this what I'm doing? But it was never to the point where I would say, oh, this is it. I'm walking away. I'm going back.
Yeah.
Never to that degree.
I have to admit that if you told me, no, I never had a doubt, I might think you were a little goofy, but it sounds like you were pretty realistic about it. And then later on, you got into medical school in an osteopathic school. Once you were there, did you immediately have the feeling that you were in the right place, or did that take some time as well?
I knew I was in the right place in the sense of this path could allow me to honor what I felt was honoring my mom and my sister, right? This was an opportunity for me to, prevent someone else going through that loss. It was an opportunity for, in a lot of ways, for maybe a little bit of, selfishness to say, gosh, I've made something out of myself. My mother and my sister's life was not in, their death or life was not in vain. So all of that, right? So from that perspective, yes, it felt like the right thing. I enjoyed the learning. But again, it was tremendously difficult for me. It didn't come easy. Yeah.
Well, the volume of stuff to be dealt with.
It was challenging, and it was almost a new way of learning. I mean, the way I learned for architecture was very different than what I had to do for medicine. I mean, the amount of repetition and the volume and I had all my little, I'd be made fun of how many times I rewrite my notes, and it was tough. It was tough. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it sounds like you've been to medical school, all right. So once you got to the finishing point, was there any doubt about whether it was going to be family medicine, or did you toy with some other ideas at all?
I learned pretty early that I really enjoyed the breadth of family medicine, but I also was really intrigued with sports medicine, because through my sort of that 2 years of doing post-bac and figuring out, where I wanted to go, I had started doing Taekwondo. I had really changed my own health. So I was really intrigued with athletes and being fit. So I was really interested in sports medicine and wanting to figure out a way that I could tack that on. So as I was going through medical school and looking at residency, I was also thinking about, okay, how do I fit this sports medicine thing in there? But I knew I wanted to come at it from that foundation of family medicine.
And similar question, once you got there, you did your family medicine residency in Milwaukee, Minnesota, by the way. I was not aware there was a Milwaukee, Minnesota. But did you feel once you got there that you were really headed in the right direction?
Yeah, family medicine was definitely where I wanted to be. I enjoyed that connection, developing that relationship, having some continuity of care. I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, very much.
You mentioned in your CV that you had a particular focus on sports and integrative medicine. What, why do you think you were drawn into that area?
The integrative medicine piece, I think, spoke to my need or my desire for prevention, looking at things maybe a little bit holistically. And I think that just sort of came out of, could I have done something different for my mom and my sister? Or could the system, healthcare, had done something different for them? So I think that's what drew me to integrative medicine, and the desire to understand what else could I put in my toolbox besides just the clinical knowledge. And then sports medicine was just, again, I really sort of enjoyed being an athlete and working with people that were motivated. So those two things were really what fed those two additional interests. It's
nice to work with people that want to be healthy, isn't it?
Yes, it makes a difference. Yes, it does.
Yeah, it really, really does.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I have a message about the upcoming DPC conference. You know, pre-authorizations, reimbursements, administrators, and EMR clicks are robbing your time with patients and challenging your clinical judgment. Physicians, you don't have to be miserable in medicine. You didn't pick the wrong profession, just the wrong practice model. Thousands of physicians have opened independent direct primary care offices around the country. Patients pay a flat monthly subscription for everything a local doctor's office can offer. This November, the Direct Primary Care Conference delivers the nuts and bolts of launching a membership practice that offers concierge care at blue-collar prices. Seasoned direct primary care practitioners from around the country will descend on Dallas to be part of the happiest CME on earth. So check out dpcconference.com for tickets to our next conference. First-time physician attendees receive $200 off, thanks to a grant from the Physicians Foundation. Visit online at dpcconference.com. And now let's get back to our interview. And now let's get back to today's interview. Well, let's talk about some of your first few practice situations. You stayed in Minnesota. I'm not familiar with the location of Burnsville, but imagine it must be close by to where you trained, and you were doing sports and orthopedic care. How was that for you?
I enjoyed it. It definitely appealed to, I was able to kind of bring in, because I was focusing on ultrasound and doing some procedures. So I think I started to see, okay, some of the things that I enjoyed about architecture, kind of that detail, that high-end coordination, kind of conceptualizing, all of that sort of came to play when I was able to do ultrasound guided procedures. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed, at least initially, some of the coverage that was involved. Minnesota gets bitter cold during football season. So that love was challenging at times. And I'm not a cold weather person, having come literally from the equator. It was like, man, What am I doing out here? But I liked the relationship. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed working with the trainers, and I functioned really well in a team environment. I functioned really well in, supporting people towards their ultimate goals. So I really, really, it was a great experience, clinically, and my growth as a physician. And, I enjoyed it. The weather, I could have done without Minnesota winters, but, otherwise it was good.
Well, now your move to the Northwest, was that in some way catalyzed by the need for a climate change, or was it something else entirely?
Certainly part of that. And we did it, at the sort of the beginnings of COVID, or shortly, after COVID, because we were just to the point where healthcare was looking really different. My wife is also a physician.
Yeah, it really was.
The weather was brutal. I had gotten to the point where I didn't feel like I could stretch as much as I wanted to in my current position. I'd also really started to get involved in lifestyle medicine and, again, getting back to my roots of how do I help people prevent disease, or certainly, I think, acquire a different level of health, which I wasn't doing in my day-to-day practice. And our kids were still pretty young. So we did a lot of thinking and said, look, if we're going to go, now's probably the time to do it. And we had actually looked out this way for fellowship, and I didn't get in. So we said, hey, and my wife found a job. And then at that point, we're like, well, I guess we're moving. So then we picked up and moved.
And once again, a little bit of a change, not only of venue, but of the nature of practice. You were actually in an urgent care environment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing since I've been here. Yep.
And how did that strike you? I mean, was that something that you really, really enjoyed, or was it a matter of something must be missing here that led to your evolution into Saravit Wellness? How did that come about?
It just further highlighted, in my opinion, how ill-equipped healthcare is right now to truly keep people healthy and to treat, and in most cases, reverse chronic disease. So from that perspective, it became exceptionally challenging to go to work and function in that environment that was truly the opposite of what I was trying to build with Saravit Wellness. While it, I think it helped me grow individually, it gave me time to kind of noodle on how I wanted to develop Saravit, what pieces and parts I wanted, gave me some latitude to do some personal development. And it just reaffirms that what I'm doing with Saravit Wellness is truly where I'm supposed to be. Yeah.
One of my mentors during my residency was fond of saying that we don't have a healthcare system in America. What we have is a disease care system. Would you agree with that attitude?
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit more about the evolution and the establishment of Saravit. This is truly another great leap, almost as much of a blind leap, I should think, than leaving architecture and going to medical school. But this is an entirely different way of thinking about healthcare, at least from the way that I see it. And I'm wondering if you agree, and if you can give us some of the details about how you're going to make that happen.
And it's just been sort of this, as you call it, an evolution. Because when I started doing coaching, and that's sort of the crux or sort of the foundation of Saravit, when I started doing it, it was in Minnesota when I was doing sports medicine. Because again, I was seeing people and their quality of life wasn't changing. And I would give my sort of, 10-minute spiel or 5-second spiel in the clinic setting about what I thought could help them, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a structure. I didn't have a system. And I started looking. I had been following the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, just sort of in a very periphery, cursory way. And then I really started to dig in a little bit more when I was in Minnesota. And when I really got into it and the mission statement, I was just like, yes, these are my people. This is what I've been looking for. And that, right? It was like, oh, this is fantastic. And that was designing Saravit around the principles of lifestyle medicine was what I started with. Now, I in no way had, and I'm still sort of evolving and sort of growing in the business and figuring out what's the best way. And when I started then, it was just making myself available after hours, right? If somebody had an interest if I could, figure that out on my normal clinic encounter, I'd have a conversation with them kind of offline. And then we do coaching on our own and work with them. And that just blossomed into one person, two people, word of mouth. And I attached a name to it, which is the blend of my two kids, my two girls. One's Sarit and the other is Avital. So I blended their two names, and that's Saravit, and just created the entity. And I continue to just put together pieces and parts. Learning to run a business is a completely foreign concept. Learning social media there have been so many things that I have learned and are continuing to learn, but just again, being open to, gosh, what if, right? What if this is where I'm supposed to be? It's been, I got to tell you, Randy, it's been a lot of fun. It's hard, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's been amazing. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I'm good for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it looks like to be the kind of healthcare provider that you have become? Do people come with you with complaints, or do they come to you and say, here I am, please make sure I stay healthy? Just what does it mean to go and see a physician at a wellness center?
Most people find me because they're not healthy and they want to either correct some current disease, they're diabetic and they want a different way. They don't want to end up, adding another agent, or, their doc's been telling them they need to change and they don't know how to do it. So most people find me with some disease process that is motivating them to change their lifestyle, or motivating them to even have a conversation. And that's usually where it starts. It's just a conversation. And all of this is done virtually. So I haven't established a brick and mortar, because I think it opens up more opportunity to help. And then there's a cost, right? Anytime. So right now it's all virtual, and it just starts with a conversation, and it's just really me trying to understand where they are and where do they want to go. And then we sort of come up with a quote unquote a lifestyle medicine prescription, right? What does their nutrition look like? And maybe I'll give a little bit of context. If I can, just, what is lifestyle medicine for it? Yeah. If folks don't know what that is. So
please do. Yeah.
Lifestyle medicine is essentially using evidence-based research and nutrition science to say, how can we support people to, in most cases, prevent and even reverse chronic disease. And that, that bucket includes diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and then all the downstream sequelae of those entities. And the pillars are really nutrition, sleep, exercise, avoiding risky substances, having good social connections. So those pillars are what we wrap people with. And the nutrition can look a little bit different depending on what disease state we're trying to reverse. Supporting people on how we institute and maintain regular physical activity. How do we modify our lifestyle to support good restorative sleep? And we can manipulate our nutrition. We can, there's a lot that goes into sleep physiology, more than I ever recognized. So it's developing that prescription for that person to get them to their end goal. And it's very much a collaborative relationship, which I really enjoy. And I think that's what speaks to, when I think back going into sports medicine, I really like that team environment. I like that collaborative relationship. And as I practice in the traditional system, it was very, sort of prescriptive. I just sort of sat there and just said, okay, this is what you should do. As opposed to, well, what do you want? And let's come to an agreement on how we're going to accomplish those goals. So I really enjoy that collaborative relationship, and that coaching, right? Being able to talk to people on a consistent basis, because we don't get that opportunity in traditional healthcare, right? We see most of our patients right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every once in a blue, we order some labs, we identify a disease, we give them a medication, and then maybe we say, okay, go see a nutritionist or
Oh,
go
you're
over
so right.
here. But we don't really develop and talk to them longitudinally and support them. So it's just so awesome. It's awesome.
I really don't like to make this program about me, but I'm going to tell you a little story about me and get you to comment on it a little bit. I spent the last decade of my practice after I stopped operating. I was the medical director of a chronic wound care center. And as you might guess, the vast majority of my patients were type 2 diabetics. And the typical scenario would be that they show up with a difficult wound. We would see them weekly and check their hemoglobin A1C every time. And of course, when they first showed up, they'd be in double figures. And over the next 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes 2 or 3 months after those weekly visits, their hemoglobin A1C would be within normal range, their wound would be healed, and they would be discharged. And within 6 to 12 months later, they would be back in my wound clinic. So what they needed was a Saravit Wellness Center, it sounds like, in order to help them perpetuate those behaviors that we were unable to sustain once they were gone.
Yep. And that's funny. That's exactly kind of that gap that I want to fulfill, right? Because it's challenging the way our system is right now to be able to do what I have the luxury of doing. And if I can fill that void, so that we really can help people change their quality of life. And I would tell patients again, back in Minnesota, we can't always define our quantity, but by God, we can change our quality of life. If we have the right, the knowledge, but then the support is the key thing. Yeah.
I can't remember what the figure is right now, but I know that the average total body weight of Americans has continued to increase, and I forget what the percentage of officially obese Americans that there are, but there are a lot of them. And yet we don't even enter obesity as a diagnosis code many times when patients come in to see their internist or their family practitioner. And how do you propose that we do something about that one problem, which I think would change the entire state of healthcare in America, and that is the problem with overweight?
And to be honest, that's kind of part of the root cause. I mean, there are things kind of brewing under the surface that sort of snowball into that. But I think if we could help people be and get to and maintain a healthy weight, we could potentially reverse a good majority of what we spend our healthcare dollars on and where our morbidity and mortality lies. I think, again, spending time understanding why people have gotten where they've gotten, because it's multifactorial. Understanding, do they want to change? Are they ready to? And then identifying a plan that supports them long term. And that requires time. And the way our system is structured right now, there's not enough time to do that. There just isn't. I mean, I don't know. What do we get? 15 minutes, 20-minute visits? And that's not all face-to-face. The first 10, 12 minutes is all rooming and vitals and doing all the epic clicks and make sure their meds are up to date and all their social history, right? The actual face-to-face time with your clinician is so small. To have that kind of connection is challenging. So it's almost like we have to, the physician has to, or whomever the provider is, has to be willing to bring up that difficult topic, because it can be a difficult topic, and say, if we could change this one metric, if you're ready and willing to change this one metric, you can then have a greater impact on all these other diagnoses. Does that interest you? And if the answer is yes, then you plug them in with whether it's me or you find another one like me or another, somebody that then takes it from there and sees them to the end.
Well, Dr. Siatta Dunbar, I think we can identify you as a true pioneer, one that hopefully will be only the beginning of something much better for citizens of the United States and hopefully across the world, because I know it's not just an American problem. I want to thank you for taking the time to let me pick your brain and find out some details about you. That's been fascinating hearing about how you came from being an architect to being a physician. That's really a fascinating story. But we're at the point where I'm going to close my mic and get out of the way, and we're going to give you an opportunity to speak on your own. So, audience, this is Dr. Siatta Dunbar with her prescriptions for success.
Yeah, I would say there are three things that really jump out at me that I think have sort of helped me navigate sort of all these iterations of myself. Number one, stay open and flexible. My life has truly shown me time and time again that opportunities have come to me when I've been open to the possibility. Just the possibility of something. As I've talked about, I studied architecture, and never in a million years did I ever imagine that I would end up becoming a physician. And then when I got there, seemingly the Holy Grail, and then life showed me again, and being open to what if has blossomed into what I feel so blessed and honored to be able to do now, which is really just to coach and help people truly acquire optimal health and long-term vitality, and be the gap that I wish my mom and my sister had. Number two, I would seek out and invest in your personal development. And this doesn't matter your age or your years of experience. We all can and really should continue to grow. You should constantly be looking for people that can push you to be better, not do more, but to be more. And then third, I would say make time for play. And this is something that is a newer concept for me, and I'm implementing as often as I can, because it's truly shown me that I can be my most productive and creative when I increase the time that I allow for play. And that can look really different, right? It can be making sure I'm carving out enough time just to be with my kids and letting them dictate what we do, just unencumbered, no phone, no nothing, right? Just kids know how to play. We forget how to play as adults. We are just so focused on our goals, and just putting that aside and just being, just being able to laugh. I mean, think about your kids, right? They can laugh, just that guttural laugh. So make time to play, go for a run, whatever your thing is, but just carve out that time to play. It truly does increase your productivity and your creativity. So those would be my top three sort of recipes or prescriptions for success.
Well, Dr. Siatta Dunbar, you have accumulated quite a bit of wisdom in your relatively young life, and I want to congratulate you for the success of Saravit Wellness, and I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience where they can find you and more about you if they're so inclined.
I'm always available for a conversation. The easiest is probably just to email me, and it's Dr. Dunbar at Saravit, SARIVIT, wellness, all one word, .com. And then my website is the same, saravitwellness.com. You can read a little bit about me and what I'm trying to do. And again, this is I'm a work in progress. So the website changes as I fine tune how I can be of the best service to the people that are ready and willing to sort of change their outcomes and change their quality of life. So be happy to be of service to anyone.
Well, Dr. Siatta Dunbar, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I thank you for taking the time.
It has been truly my pleasure, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating gives our podcast much more visibility. That helps us reach many more listeners. You'll find exclusive content on our Patreon page, including membership-only material like personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. To be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe, and while you're there, learn how to get CME credit from CMify just by listening. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.